Now here comes the most time-consuming part. I'm going to take all of these beef roast and I'm going to have to debone them, remove the excess fat, and also do my best at removing all the sinew or tendons that there might be running through it. We won't know what all is in there until we actually go ahead and cut into it. The best way I have found to do this is to get a very thin, long, with a flexible tip meat carver knife. The one I have in my hand is Rada. Also, a fillet knife works pretty well too. I am just sticking the tip of my knife against the fat or the tendon, whichever part I'm working on, and I'm just running the knife as close to that fat or tendon as I can get in order not to lose too much meat, and just lifting, pulling, and sliding the knife through. Now all the stuff that you cut off, including the bone, go ahead and throw in a freezer bag. Make sure you label it, and go ahead and label it as beef bones for broth. And when you get enough, you can go ahead and make some beef broth and then can it at some point. Whenever we go to cube up these roast, we want to cut against the grain each time. So when you have your big slab of meat, this particular roast had the grain running one direction, so I cut across the grain in the other direction. Well, then each little piece that I cut, I look at the grain, and then I might have to change directions and cut it. It's kind of hard to explain. It's something you just have to see. So you just want to look for what direction the grain is running on the meat and then cut across that, okay? And that just helps to make it not as tough, especially whenever you go to chew it. It's more tender because it kind of falls apart a little easier. The reason we want to remove as much fat from the meat as possible when canning is because when you're pressure canning, you know, it's at a very high temperature, like a minimum of 240 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that fat is actually melting and it's boiling and bubbling up inside the jar. And it can actually come up to the very top of the jar and come between the mouth of the jar and the lid and kind of seep out. And if you have that fat between the lid and the mouth of the jar, it can cause your lid to fail and you will not get a proper seal. And you really don't want to waste all that expense and time, obviously. Not to mention that it is not recommended to can fat anyhow. There's a possibility that the required temperature might not be reached inside the center of the fat, so they just recommend not canning anything with a lot of fat in it. You might be wondering what type of roast I am using. Honestly, it's a variety. It's whatever I pulled out of the freezer. So there are some chuck roast, arm roast, shoulder roast, rump roast. There might be some others. Those are the only ones I can think of right now. So yeah, it's just any type of roast that I get, this is what I do. You can see all this goodness right here inside of this beef bone. That'll make some tasty and very healthy beef broth. Now all of this will get put in a freezer bag and will be labeled beef for broth, and the rest of it is what we will can in our beef stew.